Hello, and welcome to the podcast. My name is Lowell, pronouns he, him, and I'm joined here by multiple co-hosts for our Best of the Year recording, in which we, the hosts, make our choices about which game we enjoyed the most, not necessarily the game that was published in 2022, not even necessarily the game we played in 2022, but the game maybe that we read, that we enjoyed, that we dug. And we're going to talk about that, and interspersed between our sets of conversations are going to be recordings from community members who are also making their picks. This is our big double-sized annual episode that takes a lot of work on the part of an editor, and less so for us because we're just going to talk. So let me introduce our co-host briefly. We have with us Shane.
Hey Lowell, how you doing?
Good. And yourself?
Good. I just want to acknowledge that I'm recording from the land of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, and that sovereignty was never ceded.
Excellent. And then we also have with us Ray.
Hello, I am part of the legion of co-hosts here today. My pronouns are he, they, and yeah, I'm super happy to be on. It's a miracle we all got together. We're like across four different time zones. Amazing.
And then we also have with us David Morrison.
Hi, I use he, him pronouns. It is lovely to be here with you all. I probably said this last time, but this is always a high point. The Gauntlet calendar is the end of year podcast, so I'm greatly looking forward to hearing what you all have to say and what our community members add as well.
And we also have Sherri.
Hi, I use she, her pronouns, and I'm so happy to see all these faces and looking forward to hearing their lists.
And of course, me. Any thoughts on 2022 before we roll into our actual discussion? This was a weird year, like half pandemic still hanging around and half generally are we alive? I don't know. But at least that's
are we alive is a very good way of putting it.
My reaction. Any thoughts on descriptors, or like are we just kind of paddling in place? I don't know. Shane, thoughts?
I mean, it's not one or the other, right? We can be paddling in place, but still have some descriptions.
Yes.
I mean, this is pretty disappointing. But what stands out for me about gaming this year is just how many sessions I ended up having to cancel. When I looked back, putting my list together for this episode, there were a bunch of games, like really a lot, where I think they might have gotten mentioned on this episode, but ended up getting cancelled either. I had some health stuff, I had some scheduling stuff, some life stuff. So did many of my players. So, yeah, I see a lot of potential that was kind of left on the table, unfortunately.
Ray?
Yeah, I think 2022 was one of the hardest years I've ever experienced. The pandemic, the panini still being a thing. But also, my health was, it continues to be pretty terrible this year, and this was the year that I really tried to gain access to gender affirming therapy, and it's been tough. It's been super difficult, and it's more difficult because games are really a solace for me, right? Mm-hmm. A way to connect and a way to, as it has been for how many years in the panini, but this year was just hard to play. It was just hard to get to the table. I am very grateful each time I managed to do it, and for the people I got to play with. So that I'm really happy about. But also this year was the year that two of my games got published, Our Haunt and Apocalypse Keys. So some really good highs and some very low lows, and mostly on most days, just happy I'm still around and still here.
David, you were another one of, I believe, our cadre of people in the community who got COVID this year, right?
Yes, indeed. It wasn't too bad. All told, the worst thing was just having to stay locked in a room for 2 weeks. Not 2 weeks, but, a period of time, which wasn't fun. But in terms of my health, it was fine, really. Nothing worse than a cold for me. So thankful for that. But yeah, I think my descriptor for the year would probably be, continuing the theme, a mixed bag, I think it would be fair to say. I mean, gaming-wise, I have had some absolutely amazing games this year, but I haven't got as many games played as I would have liked. Both new games and just just other stuff that I've wanted to sort of get to the table, and I've just not been able to this year. I think there's a couple of things, as far as I can tell, sort of on that front. One of them is primarily a positive thing in that I have been doing stuff with people in real life. I've got a chance to travel a bit, both in the country and outside of it, all that sort of thing, which has been amazing and really good to get done again, but also obviously bad for scheduling games, especially where it's like, I know that I'm going to be away for a weekend at some point in this month, but I don't know when it is yet, so I can't even plan around it. And it's all those sort of things that have kind of acted as blockers to me really getting as much stuff out there as I'd have liked, which has been a shame. But that said, like I said, for most of the reasons for that have been pretty good. I have also found this year particularly, like, my ability to do anything even remotely creative has been absolutely hosed. I've been really struggling with that, but that's another thing. I also actually realised as well, sort of on the scheduling front, and it hadn't really clicked to me before. It was actually sort of when I was thinking about this, it kind of crossed my mind. So I started playing games on the Gauntlet in September 2018, which feels like a very long time ago now. But I sort of did the maths, and I realised it's like, actually I was only playing games on the Gauntlet for about 18 months before lockdown started happening. Mm-hmm. And I think so much of, like, when I really hit my stride running and playing stuff in the community was obviously when everyone was in lockdown, and it was so easy to just go, yeah, I'll schedule 3 or 4 games a week every week, regardless of the time of year or anything else, and that'll be fine because no one's doing anything. And so then when you get into the point, it's like, actually, no, I have something approximating a life again now, so it's more difficult to do that. It's a weird realization, I think. But yes, sorry that was a bit of a ramble, but broadly good, but with some missed opportunities.
And Sherri, your descriptor of the year, your thoughts?
It was an exhausting blur. I was in the midst of sort of that last bit of a huge 3-year series of massive projects where I was, unfortunately, kind of both the expert and a bit of the single point of failure. So it was super stressful. It was a time of, like, real uncertainty about, was I good enough? Was I going to be able to pull this big thing together? And then I lost my father, and in the middle of all of that. And so my awareness of the rest of the world was not the best, and yet consistently through, I was playing games. They were golden. They were that one thing I could count on. But I can't say that I remember them as well as I would have otherwise. So it was like, when I went back and looked through what I played, I was like, oh, that was so fun. Oh, that was great. But there was just so much tumult in between then and now that I don't think that I've set them up in my head as the jewels that they actually were. So it was kind of nice to go back and look at the really fun, amazing, creative things I got to do, because there was some great stuff.
Yeah, I like the descriptor of a year of tumult and joy. Like, there were some really good high points, but it's a lot of weird stuff. But we are here to celebrate the games that we did play or read or enjoy or absorb, and we did dig. So we are now going to talk to our co-hosts, and we are going to start with Shane, who asked to go first because it is pretty late for Shane. And Shane said
past my bedtime
that she might fade out. So we're going to start with you.
All right. I have basically 2 honourable mentions, 2 runners-up, and a favourite game. I was very disciplined about cutting this list down because there are many more games that I could have mentioned. My first honourable mention, I talked about this on last month's podcast, so I won't say too much today, but Songs for the Dusk by Kavita Pajuri was incredibly fun. It's a Forged in the Dark game about brave and compassionate adventurers in the far future. People who heard last month's podcast will know this was supposed to be a longer game, but got cut short when I got COVID and couldn't really run for a while. But every moment that we actually got to play, which was, I think, 5 or 6 sessions, was just a joy. So full of potential and story material that was really exciting, that I was excited to follow up and follow through. If we'd gotten to play out the quarterly as planned, I think it could easily have been my actual favourite game of this year. So I'm happy to say, as an honourable mention. My other honourable mention is a quarterly game I ran starting in January. That was Fate of the Fairy Queen, my reskin of Fate of Cthulhu from Evil Hat Games. It's about time travellers from beyond the apocalypse arriving in the present to try and prevent the Fae Queen, in my case, from destroying humanity. This is kind of my token adventure game for the episode, so it doesn't seem like all I care about is emotions and community and things like that. I like things that explode as well. Things I enjoyed about this game, I appreciated that I got to exercise some of my more trad GM skills. Fate isn't the most trad game, but, I love all the story games that I run that let the players and the mechanics help create the world collaboratively. But I also really like being the kind of GM who just decides what the story is going to be, who gets to build situations and challenges and surprises and secrets and then just let the players loose on all of that and follow them and see how it goes. It was also really exciting in the ways that Fate is not a trad game, where the players could do something totally unexpected that completely upended all of my plans and expectations, as when 3/4 of the way through the series, they decided to travel through a portal to the plane of Fairy and wage an actual war against the Fairy Queen and her armies. That was the big example, but there were lots of times that the players and their characters surprised me, and I really loved that the Fate mechanics made it very easy and fun to do that every time. I think I actually quite like Fate. I don't really think of it as a game that I love, but last year I said iHunt was my favourite game. This year I really enjoyed this. Maybe I should run some more of this. The game also ended really beautifully. I wanted to mention where we finished, the surviving characters travelling into the woods a year later to remember Lowell's character, who had given her life in the final confrontation with the Queen. I don't know if I told you this or if you know this, Lowell, but my plan for that last session was that after each of you had done your epilogues, there'd be some sort of post-credits scene almost, where we revealed that the Fairy Queen was secretly still alive and plotting her revenge. Just like at the end of Flash Gordon, when Ming the Merciless's laughter rings out sinisterly after he's been killed, run through with the rocket cone, which really disturbed me as a kid when I watched that movie over and over again. But then the epilogues were so good, and particularly Matt's epilogue, which was the last that we had, was just so quietly moving that I couldn't have my cheesy villainous moment afterwards.
Oh, I love it when that happens, when the players move you to be a better person.
So, yeah, Matt, if you're listening, your epilogue was actually so good it stopped me from resurrecting the Fairy Queen, and so may have saved the world, really. My two runners-up, and if I was naming a category for this award, this would be the best games about the surprisingly complex emotional life of seemingly vacuous teenage athletes category. Two games in this category that I played rather than ran. Those were Worldwide Wrestling by Nathan D. Paoletta that Tyler ran and talked about on the podcast, and a playtest of Fight with Spirit that Haley from the Storybrewers ran. That's their forthcoming sort of sports anime-inspired game. The version we played, we were squires in a medieval jousting tournament. That was our sport. Both these games alternated between scenes where we were playing the sport, and listeners, do not try to tell me that professional wrestling is not a sport. I am not hearing that. But the games alternate between these sports-focused scenes and scenes that are more about the emotional lives of the characters and the tensions and backstage politics that they have to deal with. In Fight with Spirit, the game does a phenomenal job of connecting those aspects, so the sporting scenes are really directly infused with emotional conflict and drama. The game has these mechanics called traits and conditions that give you really strong support and structure to play out a satisfying emotional arc for your character, both in and out or on and off the field of battle, the field of competition. A lot of people on the Gauntlet, I think all of my co-hosts know that I have this kind of hatred or even phobia of role-playing games that use cards. I cannot cope with them at all. But this game, and specifically the competition scenes, were so good that I could overcome my aversion to cards and just be completely absorbed in trying to defeat my opponent and my own doubts. And that is maybe the highest compliment I could pay to a game. In Worldwide Wrestling, there's less emotion in the matches themselves, which I don't say as a criticism because, the joy of that game is playing this very separated set of roles of these larger-than-life in-ring personas and the human athletes behind the scenes. But when I thought back for this episode, I was really struck and surprised by how much the emotional beats from that game have stayed with me. The tension that my character felt between his excitement about sort of getting a bit famous, being on the road when his beloved boyfriend was back at home, and his worries that his own success could come at the expense of people he cared about. Those still feel powerful and resonant to me. I'm not sure how much of that was the game mechanics and how much was just Tyler's skill as a GM. Maybe my own skill as an extraordinary improvisational actor. But for letting me live out my superstar athlete fantasies, Worldwide Wrestling, and Fight with Spirit are my runner-up games for this year. I also just really liked my characters in both these games. As I was thinking about this show, I was like, maybe I should write fan fiction about them. But I don't know if that's...
Yeah, you should. I've seen a lot of it on Tumblr recently, and it's really... I enjoy reading like that stuff, so
I did actually get a piece of fan fiction from the Fight with Spirit game that I ran as well, amusingly enough. That was another one of these like slight victims of scheduling where we missed the last session, so we couldn't actually have the climactic match, which was a real shame. But
so did fan fiction happen instead? Because wow, that is so cool though. That is so cool.
But it was just chime in and say, I really enjoy Fight with Spirit. I'm looking forward to seeing sort of when the finished product is out.
Oh yeah, for sure. 100%.
But that brings me to my favourite game of 2022, and that was Sasha Astrid's The Girlfriend of My Girlfriend is My Friend.
Ooh, yes. Nice.
I love to get cheered for my favourite game.
Because it's such a good game, right?
It is.
So I just super agree.
It stood out to me before I'd ever played it. First of all, for its graphic design, which is so original and striking. It's really dynamic, pastel and fluorescent MS Paint aesthetic that tells you so much about how bright and messy the game is going to be. And then it's also a joy to read. It's 20 pages or whatever, but it's actually fun to read the text, even independently of how good it is as the game. It's a game about being a young trans person with a strong focus on the ways that is joyous and messy and emotional. I don't think I need to go into the ways that a celebration of trans youth is radical and important in the context we're living in, but that is, a real strength of the game, but by no means its only strength. The game doesn't live in its importance. It wears it very lightly. It's incredibly witty and fun. It has, by far, the best named playbooks in any role-playing game. Second to none. You get playbooks with names like The Trans Girl Who's Really Into Architecture, The Werewolf Who I Smoked With One Time and Is Pretty Cute Actually, The Other Werewolf, Guy with Quilt. Honestly, I could just keep reading playbook names till Lowell tells me I'm out of time. Mechanically, it's quite simple. It's a diceless game, organised into scenes that the GM frames in collaboration with the players. At the end of every scene, characters gain a new thing they can always do, so they're always developing. There's a cool thing where they have a track that they will fill out through play towards a kind of personal climax called the arc and finale. So, for example, whenever someone gives the trans girl who's really into architecture an opportunity to gush about her interests and she takes it, she marks a box, and when she's marked enough boxes, she gets to take centre stage and play out a climax with elements from a pick list. That's things like, I'm ready to tell someone I have feelings for them, or I've created something beautiful and I'm ready to show it off. This game really meant a lot to me personally because I recognised so much of my own youth in it, and the kinds of queer community and connection that had been really sustaining for me but had very much receded during the pandemic, as well as receded as I aged out of those communities and scenes. I think it's tremendously beautiful and powerful and just a really masterful work of game design. I think Sasha should be really proud of what she accomplished with this game. And I still remember, as a highlight in my life in gaming, the climactic scene from the one-shot I ran in the Gauntlet in March, where two characters' fingers gently touched as they were both browsing at a zine fair together. And the game had done so much to make such a small moment feel powerful and moving and weird and funny. There were ghosts, it was a haunted zine fair, there was a lot going on. So, yeah, I was a little bit sorry to end on such an earnest note, but that's it. The Girlfriend of My Girlfriend is My Friend is my favourite game of 2022.
Awesome.
Oh, but earnest notes are lovely.
Yeah.
Listeners, we're now going to hear from some of our community members.
Hello, Gauntlet podcast listeners. This is Rich. I am excited to bring you one of the staunch GMs and amazing players, Tyler Lominack. How you doing, Tyler?
I'm doing well, thank you.
So let's talk about Game of the Year. What is, and again, not new, doesn't have to be new, but what was your favorite Game of the Year for 2022?
My favorite Game of the Year was Veil Iterations, which is a kind of a rework of the Veil by Lowell Francis. Kind of brought in some new playbook moves, brought in a little bit of changes up on the currency of the Veil, brought up some changes for the way that we spend and use our various special abilities. Excellent all around. We had a great time. We're still actually kind of finishing it up right now. Had wonderful players in it. And I think we've gotten in 17 or 18 sessions. So we just could not put it down. And it had all of that cyberpunky feel. I think that Fraser Simon's The Veil is amazing as a starting off place. I love playing The Veil. But kind of the changes that Lowell made really highlighted a little bit of the way we were wanting to play it and still remain true to Fraser's vision. So it was an absolute delight. And by far and away, it was my favorite Game of the Year.
Nice. So tell me, Tyler, like, what are you playing? What have you enjoyed? Any big highlight moments from Veil?
I'm playing the Executive, which is a kind of an unusual playbook. You know, you're the man, you work for the corpse. You are the one who is a Mr. Johnson, to use the vernacular, setting up jobs. But there's an element that Lowell brought in of you're able to set up certain things that your corp gives you. Like in my instance, I have luxury and influence. But then you could use your spendable resource to like pick up for a short time other of these things from your corp. And it has been really exciting to see what it means to have that little bit of influence to go get secrets, or that ability to get someone to protect your party's loved one if you need to, or that entry into the club. That's been a lot of the real joy I've had from it, is using that very narrative type power to allow the flavor of the Executive to come in. Sometimes you think that like the corp character would be a little boring. You know, you're not a fighter. You don't have all of these nifty cyberware things. But accessing into the corporations in a cyberpunk game, having that kind of behind the curtain feel of what's going on from their side, has really added a lot to our game. And I've really enjoyed exploring that part of it.
Well, Tyler, thanks so much for sharing with everybody your Game of the Year for 2022.
Thank you, Rich.
Hi, I'm Chris, pronouns he, him, and the Game of the Year for me was Eotenweard, a game that's in development by Alan Reese. It's a gritty, low fantasy historical game set in Britain around 600 AD. There's echoes of the Roman legions who withdrew, and there is foreshadowing to the age of Vikings through the Saxons who are worshipping Woden, the Allfather. There's a couple other cultural groups. There are worshippers who are dwindling in numbers of the pagan Celtic gods, and then there is the new Christ god. My character was a Celtic mystic. What I really appreciated was the rich setting, which was represented in which of those faiths you had, and then, you know, the suggestion of referring to media touchstones like The Last Kingdom, which really helped put a little bit of flavor on it for a time in history that I was really relatively ignorant about the details of anyway. And then on top of the setting was the way that the mechanics also helped drive the role-playing. So out of the gate, my character had what might be in other PBTA games seen as a condition, though there are conditions in this game. This was called a burden, and my character was burdened with pride, so I was able to play her big. And for her, there was another aspect called the temptation, which was a similar pick list to the burdens, but meant that I had two types of things driving her as a character. There are different moves that are based on different stats that you have, and if you use all of your stats, your character progresses. So that felt like some more forward momentum in the game. There was also support for the GM, which bled into being transparent for the players in terms of moves for arriving and leaving in a town or a location. And we had the chance to build those worlds, to specify the NPCs, to look at a fun list of all of the different Saxon or Celtic names, and then get to pick their dispositions, as well as trying to decide as we go to the different locations, do we want them to be dangerous or do we want them to be more of an investigation type situation when we entered those locations. So, as a recap, really the appeal of the game was the rich setting and the support in terms of role-playing, character moves, and how you interact with the gods and the settings.
Hello, Gauntleteers. It is Travis. I want to thank the Gauntlet community for an amazing year. I got to be a player this year, and I have been a forever GM, and that's kind of driven me out of the hobby a few times. But it's been so great to be a part of the Gauntlet, to learn from so many amazing GMs, to learn from the podcast, and from all the different opportunities to play games in the community. I am super, super grateful. I had a lot of great Gauntlet games this year. A wonderful Brindlewood game that I can't stop thinking about. I often think about it and smile. I'm in the middle of a good between game. I had a brief stint playing Passiones this summer. I had to leave because I got hurt, but the game is going really well. And I've had a couple of other, one-shot experiences that I enjoyed. But for me, the best game of the year has been Alice is Missing. I have just really enjoyed it. I first led it at Gauntlet Facilitator Camp this year. I had the Roll20 set up, matched up with the Discord setup, and I followed all the instructions, but man, it was hard to run technically. And so I'm grateful to the Facilitator Camp people with their patience in that. But as soon as I said to the Slack community, hey, I've written this up because it took me so long to practice this and get it down, somebody said, why don't you just use the Alice bot for Discord that'll run the whole game for you? And so I want to thank Vince for encouraging me to do that, for sending me the links and kind of checking in on me on how that was going. And I've led 3 games of Alice in the last 2 months using that bot, and it is miles different. It's such a much better experience as a facilitator player. And it just made it great. But Alice has been great. I played it with some people who've never played RPGs before or hadn't played in a long time. And I have just had all of the great Alice experiences. Super emotional, super engaging, but it was fun to watch those newer players warm up to the game, but then get really into it. I think because it's text-based and it's not, it's not as nerve-inducing as having to kind of perform as a player. And so I love Alice for that. I'm super grateful for that game and for the community.
Hello, fellow Gauntleteers. Amanda, aka I am a T-Rex here. I have been really lucky this year. I've played a lot of incredible games with a lot of wonderful people. As such, it is absolutely impossible to pick a favorite. Instead, I'm going to be picking a game that I'd like to highlight because it's really outside of my normal wheelhouse of games. Be Like a Crow by Tim Roberts of Critical Kit. It's a solo RPG, so you can play it via journaling or blogging, or Tim himself suggests on the back of a napkin, which is hardcore mode. In Be Like a Crow, you play a member of the Corvid family. A magpie or a jackdaw, crow, raven, that sort of thing. There are different sets of worlds you can play in. There's like a cyberpunk world, there's an urban one, gothic, steampunk, fantasy. Crow-Thulu was just released on the Patreon, so I'm very excited to play that. You take your crow through different life stages. You start with fledgling, move to juvenile, adult, and old crow. So instead of leveling, you are growing. It uses a deck of cards, just a standard deck, to skill check targets and generate objectives, events, etc. I personally find solo RPGs really intimidating. Removing that group contribution and performance aspect means that it's just you relying on your own creativity to tell a story that you're happy with. I'm sure everybody who's a creator that's listening to us is like, yeah, that's called creating, Amanda. But it's hard for me. And Be Like a Crow really takes some of that intimidation away by having prompts that you could really run with them and also evocative enough to inspire an interesting story. It's fun and the art's really cute. Really do recommend this one if you, like me, are a little bit intimidated by solo RPGs. Be like a crow.
Okay, bye.
G'day, this is Blake from Adelaide, Australia. Gauntlet Game of the Year. Played a lot of good games in the Gauntlet this year. Played Eotenweard and Knight's Black Agent. Sort of a couple of sessions each. Good, but it's like could be really awesome if they're just a little bit longer. Like if all the good seeds were there to be part of sort of ongoing, 8 to 12 session arcs or something. But yeah, good fun. But the one that sticks in my mind the best was called as Trophy Dark 2-Shot. The thing was called Roommates Wanted, run by Mads. It was so vivid, such a good game. Everybody role played really well. It's like we're all taking turns grabbing the steering wheel and driving the car deeper into narrative doo-doo. Mads killed it. Such a good GM. So great adventure, great GM. Just really sticks in my mind how vivid it was and good stuff.
Hi, my name is Chaotic, and my game of the year is The Girlfriend of My Girlfriend is My Friend. It is a simple, heartfelt role-playing game without a GM, and it's about art, magic, and identity. It's about being trans and growing through young adulthood together. It's my game of the year because this game has really inspired me to write a game of my own. I've played it a few times, and it's just been really fun every time. There's lots of weird stuff in it, and I really am excited about all sorts of games in the future and what sort of scene we're gonna see in the tabletop sphere. And honestly, any game with werewolves is just a really cool game.
Hi, it's Thomas Manuel, writer of the Indie RPG newsletter. My game of the year is Bloodclotte by Nick Duff and Cillian L. This is a gothic horror comedy masquerading as a kind of steampunk medical drama. You play doctors in a war-torn hospital curing strange, weird, eldritch diseases, and all the playbooks satirize some form of quackery, and I contributed a playbook about Indian medicine to the game, which I think is quite good and quite funny. If you enjoy body horror and are not weirded out by medical stuff, this game is so fun. I had such a great time playtesting it. Highly, highly recommended.
And listeners, we're back, and now we are going to hear the picks from Ray Najati. Ray, what is it that you have to tell us?
Okay, I'm going to try to be very good, because even though I didn't get to play a lot, I can always talk about games too much. So I'm going to try to be very, very good and be super concise. I'm saying this out loud to psych myself up. So, like we talked about, 2022 was really tough. I really cut down dramatically on my gaming this year in order to give myself as much space as possible to recover and to rest and to try to fit in what I needed. And so because of that, the few slots I had available, I had to spend a lot of it on playtesting. So half of these games are mine. I apologize in advance for being so indulgent. But that being said, there are some really great highlights. So for best setting, the game that I enjoyed the most was Heart, the City Beneath, specifically by Rowan Rook and Deckard. And I've talked about this on a previous episode. I had a very difficult time with the system. I will say once again that other people enjoy the system while I have not. But that being said, the setting is amazing. It is such a joy to read the book and read how weird and horrible things are. Lots of opportunity for body horror, very natural for me, very easy to get into. There's a really dark comedy. And this year I realized comedy is very difficult to write into TTRPGs. I've seen numerous times where it felt flat or it didn't really work, or worse, it punched down, right? But the dark comedy here at Heart is just absolute perfection that can twist any time into bleak horror or into a gasp of relieved laughter. We had such a fun time with vending machines full of sinister pamphlets of cultists, so on and so forth. Really good times. And Sherri's character is full of bees, which is always a plus. So I really like that. And of the game that had the best surprises, I love surprises in TTRPGs. I think the fact that we can always surprise each other is one of the best things about TTRPGs. And the best ones I got this year was from a game I made called Our Haunt, which is a cozy and creepy game of found family of ghosts who are haunting a mansion. And so when I designed it, I purposely created all these pick lists and all these choices so that you can go between Beetlejuice, kind of funny, sweet, almost to the other side, and then all the way to the other end with like Sadako horror, if you want to, right? And so it was really fun. I played Our Haunt a lot this year after the game was done, which was great. I recommend it to everybody. Work on a game that you no longer are going to work on. Best feeling in the world. And I was really surprised with how often it would swing back and forth between cozy and creepy, lots of fun surprises. And my game that had the best players, there always has to be a category of best players, I realize, especially when we're talking about our community, which I love so much. And so we're all really good players here, I have to admit. But if I had to give it to one group, it's the Twilight Throne playtesting group, of which Sherri and David are also a part of, but also Agatha and Josh. And so playtesting is so essential, and having good playtesters. Plus, Shane got to run Twilight Throne. So did a few other people. Jesse also got to on the Gauntlet. I'm super grateful for that. Good playtesters are worth their weight in gold, and our community is full of them. And I just loved hearing the stories of everybody's political machinations, emotional highs and lows, absolute tragedies. It always feels like every campaign of Twilight Throne is a prequel to what will end up being a Soulsborne game or an Elden Ring game, which is really, really good. I absolutely loved it. So we're getting close to like the big chunky games that I'm going to talk a little bit more about. So my favorite D&D alternative, right? So this is the best D&D that is not D&D, is Rhapsody of Blood. I've gotten to play this a few times. This was my, yay, you survived the crowdfunding campaign of Apocalypse Keys, Ray. Let's celebrate. So that's what Rhapsody of Blood was. Josh got to run it for me, and it was really fun. So Rhapsody of Blood offers a fun way to explore dangerous places and engage in cool Powered by the Apocalypse combat. It is a great story that's told through the generations. I love how you play out a part of character generation as the founders who destroy the first incarnation of evil. It's very cool. And then each generation of explorers form your bloodline, and that's super cool. It is one of the best ways I've seen the legacy system used that makes a lot of sense to me narratively, that carries so much gravitas and drama. Very gothic, very cool. And very, very impeccable Castlevania vibes. Excellent mechanical framing of the inspirational media. There's so many times I see a game that says it draws upon a certain form of media or a certain story, but when I look at the mechanics, when I look at the game, I don't really feel it. But Rhapsody of Blood, it is inescapable. It is very much in its mechanics, especially in the really fun combat, where there's this back and forth where someone creates an opening and then another person has to take advantage of the opening. And it really feels like that weird way of reading a boss fight, right? When you're trying to get the pattern down, but then it's translated into a TTRPG story way. I was so impressed. It was so much fun each time. So we got to beat up 2 acolytes and 2 regents. Really, really good fun. There's a little places where the design is a little rough for me, but I was still having so much fun. I would play Rhapsody of Blood again and again. If you told me to play it every week for a year and go through several generations, I would do it in a heartbeat. It's very, very good. It's the best way to play D&D without playing D&D, so I will do it again and again. So, second to the last game that I'm going to talk about, my quotation mark runner-up, basically, has to go to Best Design, which is Yazaba's Bed and Breakfast. This is a game that is so close to coming out. I can taste it. We're almost there. It's so good. But the stuff that's already out there, you can get a copy of the game already that was available before crowdfunding happened. It is such a lovely game. It is so hard to describe it because it is so unlike most TTRPGs, and yet it embodies a lot of good stuff about TTRPGs. So basically, it is a game that is played over the course of 4 to 8 chapters, and each chapter is a 1 to 2 hour scenario with its own unique but quick to learn rules. And you choose like one of 7 long-term residents to play. Usually they come with a chapter, or you can choose a different character if you want. And it's hard to describe. Like, you can just play one session and it feels super satisfying, just one chapter. The same way you pick up a book, you know, those old Enid Blyton stories, and you can just read one story, one chapter, and it's super satisfying. But if you want to read the whole set, you can do that too. That's really what Yazabuz feels like. And it is an amazing queering of childhood story tropes while engaging with very mature themes. It's complex nuance, but it just appears so effortless and simple. And I, as someone who cannot design that way, I know there's so much work and so much polish, so much expertise that is required in order to do that. I am just in awe of how beautifully designed this game is. There's a whole team behind it in Possum Creek Games, and it really shows. I'm super excited for the final version. It involves stickers and stuff like that, and it involves secret chapters that you have to unlock. It's very, very cool. I really think this is going to be the game that shows that Possum Creek Games is ready for like the next step in CTRPGs, which I'm super, super, super excited about. And then this is where we put in the drum rolls. I'm kidding, Rob. Don't put in the drum rolls. I'm just imagine, listeners, imagine the drum rolls instead. This is my, this is probably not going to surprise anybody. My top game of the year is my game. So is Apocalypse Keys. But I was thinking about it. I really couldn't put it anywhere except the top of the list because Apocalypse Keys is a game I've worked on for close to 3 years now at this point. And it's just, I'm just really proud of it. I'm just really happy with it. In case you don't know, dear listeners, Apocalypse Keys is a game of monsters holding back the apocalypse while they solve mysteries and try not to fall in love with each other or other people. And so the last time I got to run this game on +1 XP with Sherri, I forgot I designed the game. I was running the game as if it was someone else's PBTA game. Like, it just felt like I was running Hearts of Oolin. I was running Bite Marks. I totally forgot I made the game. I don't know how else to describe it. But I was like, wow, that means, I guess this is a good game that I forgot I made. I don't know how else to describe it. It was a very weird sensation. And so some of the most intense, horrifying, and emotional fun I've had this year, Lowell just hurt me real bad last night with the playtest. It was really good. Yep. But he really went for my jugular. It was repeatedly throughout the game. But it is a game where I set that up, and I'm glad Lowell went for it each time. And it was great to play with Tony on +1 XP, which is, it's hard to describe. What is +1 XP? +1 XP is an entity that is really supporting the TTRPG space, I feel like. And so that was a really fun time with Tony, Josh, and Sherri. With Lowell, we're playtesting a new mystery by Kieran Gillen, of all people. It's really good. It's really fun. We're working on 3 new playbooks by Sebastian Yue and Josh Hiddy and myself. So it's really intense design work, but it's super, super fun. But I'm also just glad that Apocalypse Keys, the core game, is out there. People are already playing. I love hearing people's stories. All of that makes it just like, it has to be my drumroll-worthy game of the year. I'm just very glad it's out there, and it couldn't have made it out there without our community. So I'm very proud of us too.
Awesome pick and a reasonable choice on your part. Listeners, we're going to hear from some more community members.
Hello again, Gauntlet listeners. I bring to you another staunch member of the Gauntlet community, Patrick Knowles, an amazing player and occasional GM. How are you doing, Patrick?
I'm good. How are you doing today, Rich?
Good, I'm good. I'm excited to have you here on the Year Ender. So here you are. You have the space. Please share with us, what is your game of the year?
So I'm going to be super cheesy, and I'm going to put forward a couple of honorable mentions before I get to the actual game of the year.
Not cheesy at all. Go for it. Drum roll, please. Who is your honorable mentions?
So my first honorable mention is a game that grew up out of the Gauntlet community. It's The Veil by Fraser Simons. And specifically, Lowell has been doing some of his own like homebrew tinkering to try and play around with some of the Veil and make it fit a little bit more with how he likes to play Cyberpunk. And we started an extended playtest game of it that has turned into an extremely long playtest game of it because we can't put it down because the Veil is amazing. It's my favorite flavor of like introspective, psychological, emotional cyberpunk, and I love our game. I love where it's been going.
That sounds awesome.
Oh, it's been amazing. My other honorable mention is the Sentinel Comics RPG from Greater Than Games, which if you've played any of the like Sentinels of the Multiverse card games, board game stuff, it's very much in that universe, and it's trying a lot of Fate-y type things, and it's trying a lot of board gamey type things to keep you in very tense, forward-moving action scenes. And it's been really fun game to learn. They have a lot of great podcast resources out there of actual plays to help you figure out what's going on with the game. And they have a really great introduction, like 6 pre-made scenarios to play through that go in a story arc that slowly immerse you into the insane boiling pot of this world. It's been really fun, and I love the way the mechanics in that slowly unfold your character's abilities through the course of a battle so that the tension is always on the up ramp. So that one's been super fun as well.
Sounds cool.
But my game of the year, the one that I want to give the final nomination, the award, the crown, the scepter, everything to, is The Between from Gauntlet Publishing.
Nice.
Which is sort of a carved from Brindlewood game. It's technically a carved from Brindlewood game, but also The Between came before Brindlewood. It's all very mixed up. But a couple of years ago, when Jason Cordova was first working on The Between, I got to play in several of the very early playtests, and the game just hooked me instantly. It's built off of being sort of an emulation of the TV show Penny Dreadful, or like Victorian British horror story tropes. Things like, Frankenstein and Jekyll and Hyde and The Picture of Dorian Gray, things like that. And you're playing almost League of Extraordinary Gentlemen style. You're playing these archetypes who have come together in their own secret society to fight against the forces of darkness and death and corruption in Victorian London. You're very fancy people living in a fancy house, and you go around in all of your fancy clothes, and all the sets are beautiful, and all the costumes are lush. It's a really great world to play in. And I think the reason why it's getting my Game of the Year vote this year is that it's one that my husband Tyler has been running the game, and we brought it to some of our home group people that I've been playing with since college. So I've been playing with these people for a really long time, and it's always been very casual, we're done with work, let's just have some fun and blow things up sort of gaming. It's never been a group that's gotten very deep into the emotional understructure of characters that often. It's not really been people that go for the hardest of hard moves. But something about the way this game is written, it lures you into the darkest parts of the character and into the most painful role-playing situations. It makes you look at all of the options before your character, and you always choose the most emotionally painful, the most cutting option. And it has been amazing to see these people that I love and I love playing games with engaging with this game in a way that I don't see as often from them. And that goes for me too. Like, this game has pulled out some really heart-wrenching scenes.
Ooh.
And you mix that with visceral body, bloody murder horror, and you mix it with oppressive social structures, and it's just this constantly enticing mix of a game. I've been playing the American Playbook, which is a former soldier type character from America who's come to London. Oh, and also he's a werewolf. And so I've been playing that with my manservant / longtime friend that's come with me across the pond, trying to integrate into a society that was not made for me at all, and failing to integrate in the most flashy and fantabulous ways. For a PBTA game, we are a shocking 27 episodes into this game.
Wow!
Yeah, it has been going, and we're only just coming up to the finale of the mastermind, reaching into the depths of the ongoing plot that's been going on behind all of our investigations. And honestly, we planned that as an end of season 1. We're going to take a little break in between, and we're going to come back and do a season 2.
Whoa, okay, man, that is sticky.
Yeah, so I don't know where we're going to end up for session count, but definitely one of the longest PBTA games that I've ever played, and one of the longest games that I've played in a couple years.
Wow.
But yeah, I encourage everybody to go check it out if you haven't gotten it through the Gauntlet Patreon. You can find it on DriveThruRPG. The base game, as I said, was written by Jason Cordova, but there have been a lot of expansions that have come out since then, mysteries written by other people, new playbooks that get revealed every couple of months, and even some like non-Gauntlet Publishing official sort of fan-made ones that you can find across itch and some other platforms. And every mystery is just so great to dig into, and every little aspect of it is beautiful and polished and baroque and infinitely complicated in the best emotional ways.
Wow, that sounds amazing. Thank you so much, Patrick, for sharing with us your game of the year.
Thank you for letting me babble about the between at you.
Hello, my name is Ben Bezonio, and my game of the year is Hide and Seek. At summer camp this year, I played hide and seek with dozens of adults during training, and then I organized a game of hide and seek, a version of it, between the high schoolers in the camp and the elementary schoolers. The high schoolers would hide hundreds of little rubber duckies as they went about their day around the lake, in the woods, around the outbuildings, and the little kids would go find them, and then if they brought enough to one of the high schoolers, they could get a reward. It was just so amazing to bring the camp together in this way. Hiding something, finding something is super exciting, and I hope people play hide and seek more in their daily lives. I also hope people create more games that use rubber duckies. All right, thank you so much. Bye.
Hello, my name is Anders Gabrielsson, and my game of the year is Urban Shadows 2nd Edition. I'm halfway through the second run of 4 sessions, and I'm having a blast running it. It has everything I wanted in an urban fantasy game. It has factional politics, it has personal drama, it's violence and magic and all that good stuff. It also has a great approach to GM support that works really well for me, where the GM has moves they make in what's essentially downtime for the various factions. And I think it's a great approach to helping the GM by giving some randomness and some ideas for what could be going on. And makes the world feel much more alive and dynamic, which I think is a great tool for a game like this. I also want to give an honorable mention to Blades in the Dark. We finished up our epic 40-plus session run of the reskin to Star Wars, Stars in the Dark, and we ended up with the crew at tier 3, which I think is kind of the upper limit of the core gameplay of Blades, and we got through to a very satisfying ending, and the game supported us all the way through the whole play experience. So that's another really great game. Thank you, and have a nice new year.
Hello, my name is David MK, pronouns he, him. And even though I wasn't able to play that many games this year, it was difficult to choose a favorite. I enjoyed Vow of the Night Aspirants, Apocalypse World Burned Over, and Nobilis, to name a few. However, my favorite game of the year for 2022 was The Queen and I. Before I go into my review, I want to mention this game would never have happened if I hadn't posted on the Gauntlet Slack app under Gauntlet Game Requests, asking for people to run Hillfolk. And they did. 2 amazing Hillfolk GMs stepped forward and we ran through a rotation. And then finally came my turn. The Queen and I was a 2-shot combination of 2 games. For the Queen by Alex Roberts through Evil Hat Productions, and Hillfolk, or Drama System, by Robin Laws through Pelgrane Press. In session 1, we played through For the Queen to generate the setting and enough information about our characters so that by the time we ended the game, we were ready to answer the prompt. The Queen is under attack, do you defend her? In session 2, we then used our collective memory to flesh out the character keeper for Hillfolk with some modifications, and resumed with our answers to the prompt before continuing to play with a modified version of the Hillfolk system. What I thought worked was that we had built up story threads and character development from For the Queen and carried forward with stronger stakes in inner character development, with some amazing emotional scenes. What I'm less sure about was the mental shift in mechanical operation from a rules-light prompt-based game to a strongly procedural game. That being said, it was great fun with all of the players, and I'm grateful to them joining me on this gaming adventure. Thank you and happy holidays.
And we're back. So, David, what is going to be your discussion, your picks now?
Yeah, so I think I'm probably going to be continuing my theme from earlier of a bit of a mixed bag. Not so much in terms of quality of the games, because all the games I have played this year have been brilliant. Both the games themselves as entities and the people I've played them with. It's all been a lot of fun. But as I said, because I've been kind of not played as many games over like this year, those games I have played, I've tended to go into a bit of a nostalgia year, as it were. So I've been touching on a lot of games that I have played previously. So I'm going to, in some ways, I'm going to cheat a little bit, because I'm going to say probably my favourite game of this year has been The Between. I've played a lot of it. I've run a campaign. I've played in a couple of campaigns. It's been great to see, because it's also a game I've written for, so I've got to see people playing with material I've made. It's been a whole lot of fun. Really enjoyed it. However, I've also talked about The Between a lot on previous episodes, and honestly, I think I'd probably struggle to say anything particularly original about it at this stage, other than I've had a lot of fun with it, and it's been really good to see sort of people embodying that world and stuff. So that's probably all I'm going to say about The Between. A couple of others of sort of games I've revisited. I played earlier this year another run of Tales from the Low Country by Luke Jordan, which remains one of my favourite BPTA games that is still technically not released, I believe, despite being basically a finished game. But it still hits really well. I got a chance to play with a couple of the new playbooks that had been released for it. Again, really excellent game. Again, I have spoken about it before, so I won't go into a load more detail. And also, we obviously, at the beginning of this year, we wrapped up the playtest of The Twilight Throne that Ray mentioned. Again, the game itself, Ray's writing of it is all absolutely fantastic. We had a great group. It was a really interesting campaign that went some great places. We sort of, like I said, we just kind of wrapped that up towards the beginning of the year, so I didn't actually play a whole lot of it this year, technically. And again, I know we talked about it a bit on sort of our wrap-up last year, so again, I won't go into a load more detail on that now, but just to say again, excellent game. And again, another one that's still not fully available yet. I think it's fair to say, though I'm sure you can always hit Ray up and.
Oh yeah, definitely. And I'm almost done with the layout for the beta version. But dear listeners, you can always reach out to me. I will send it to you. Just let me know.
So I'm going to get into 2 games that I have been playing this year. Both excellent games, both had a whole lot of fun with. So my intent is not to put shade on them by saying that maybe they're not, each of them is not in and of itself my favourite game per se, but they're games I've had a great time with. So the first is Wanderhome by Jade Dragon. Again, I spoke about this on an episode of the podcast earlier this year. But yeah, for those who haven't heard that, I'll go into a little more detail on it. It's a game of animal folk in the world of Heath, travelling around, seeing the sights, exploring the world, sometimes getting up to vaguely adventurous things, but not always. It's a kind of, it's a fantastical world, but the action in it feels very grounded. The stories in it are very much about people and the experiences they have. And this was a really fun game to play at the time that we played it, I think. We managed to get a proper sort of, I ran for 2 months. I don't think it was a full quarter. I think it was 2 months I ran for. And we had a good turnover of players in that time, which really works well with how the style of Wanderhome is set up. Because each session that you play, each story that you tell is intended to be quite self-contained. There obviously will always be some kind of continuity when you have returning characters, but you're not looking to build kind of this big, complex, overarching plot or anything of the like. So in that way, it does act as a nice contrast to something like The Between or other games where it's very focused on this like big plot and driving forwards towards a sort of a defined endpoint. In Wanderhome, you are much more playing for those individual moments, that exploring the world, having tender moments between characters, doing silly things, and that's fine. I have heard Wanderhome described as whimsical, and I definitely think elements of it are, but I think that's also a fairly surface reading of it, and it's actually there's actually some quite intense dramatic moments possible through depending on the characters you have and how they bounce off one another and so on. So what I found with Wanderhome, because obviously I was facilitating it, but not GMing it. It's a GMless game. And there is sort of, as I mentioned, this like idea of playing very much in the moment and not looking to kind of craft stories as such and letting what happens happen and the stories that will emerge from that. And I will admit, I found that a bit of a struggle at first. That balancing the idea of, well, I'm the facilitator. I'm supposed to be making the game happen. I'm supposed to be making sure everyone's enjoying themselves. And so when it does get a bit quiet, it's like, should I do a thing? Should I push on someone? And at first, I very much did. But it was nice once I started getting a bit more comfortable in the game itself, of just going, no, I can just sit back and at some point someone will break and come up with a really cool thing that they wouldn't have done if I just kind of barged into the scene, as it were. So that was really nice. It was a nice exercise in letting go of control almost there. And I think it was, again, I think I mentioned this on the podcast, but I think it was Jose who mentioned that just the act of playing the game felt relaxing, which is an unusual thing, I think, for an RPG. I mean, it's always fun, but I think like that specific sense of like relaxation was something that I've rarely encountered and is definitely present in Wanderhome. So yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed that. It was something very different. It was something that kind of challenged me in some ways, but in a good way, and I think helped me get over some of my issues with GMless games, with belonging outside belonging games in general that I've had before. Ooh. So yeah, that was sort of my thoughts on Wanderhome, really. That was a really fun experience. And I think my last game to mention, which is perhaps an odd choice for this podcast, is I've been playing a lot of Pathfinder 2nd Edition towards the second half.
Oh my god, I think I had a heart attack.
Jeez.
So yeah, I've been playing some Pathfinder 2nd Edition, which has been a lot of fun. I mean, I played a lot of Pathfinder in the past. Haven't done so much over the last, again, something that kind of fell off during lockdown because it was very much something I played with friends in person. And I've played some at a little mini in-person con, which was a lot of fun. But I've actually started running one of the Paizo Adventure Paths as well. And it's been a really fun experience running this game in a sort of formal setting that I've been really enjoying, that engaging with the game as it sort of stands. I found the changes I've made mechanically, which I'm not going to bore people with too much, but the changes to the action economy from the previous edition, very interesting and make the game feel a lot more dynamic and reactive, which I really enjoy. They've done some fun stuff around the way characters are built that means things like skills and non-combat applications of feats are a bit more interesting. There's some really good stuff in there, I think. It's still what it is. It's a D&D game. it's for playing D&D with, it is what it is. Stuff takes longer than it would if I were just playing that in a PBTA game. But I've always said I sort of enjoy that kind of the mini game of designing characters and coming up with cool character concepts and that sort of thing, which does tend to be a bit lacking in more story game style things. The tactical combat side of it is also, again, it's a fun thing to do. It's not what I want to play every game as. There are definitely some limitations to it, but I've been having a lot of fun with it. And again, playing with sort of, we are still playing online at the minute because one of my friends is away from our hometown at the moment, but no, I've been having a lot of fun with that. And the adventure path that we're playing is Strength of Thousands, which is set at a magical school in their sort of West African analogue. And that's a really good adventure path. We've only just sort of started it so far, but I'm looking forward to seeing how that develops. So yes, Pathfinder 2nd Edition. You heard it here first, folks.
I wish people could see what we looked like on video. I think we on our jaws dropped. It was so good.
Shocked.
That's an unexpected pick for me. I gotta say. So I'm shocked, but this is also the year that I ran D&D. So
I was going to point that out.
Yeah.
Like, you brought the enemy in here, Lowell. So.
The enemy. D&D is not the enemy.
Maybe in between us, all of the community members are just telling us how much fun they had with 5th edition and Pathfinder this year.
Oh my God. All right, listeners, with that shocking revelation in mind, we'll move on potentially to some more shocking revelations from our community members here.
Hello, this is Dan Brown with my Game of the Year. 2022 was a really good year for me on the Gauntlet. I actually got to playtest a lot of games that I've been working on. I spent the latter half of the year focused on a game that I've had in the works for several years called City of Whispers that deals with a fantasy city. It involves both street level play and faction level play, and it is a really it's a game that's near and dear to my heart. And I've been very grateful for Gauntlet's participation in the play testing. Folks on the Gauntlet are fantastic and enthusiastic play testers. But I would not say that it is my game of the year. In fact, my game of the year is one that I'm playing right now with Alan. Alan's running Free from the Yoke, which is a flavor of the Legacy, Life Among the Ruins games. Legacy was one of the first, I think, to really make faction level or house level play a key part of the game. And it's been really great to experience this in a game that's been very thoroughly play tested. Free from the Yoke is far more engaging than I thought it would be. It doesn't drag at all, and it really supports this back and forth between what's happening on the ground and what's happening kind of in the political sphere. This is Alan's first run of Free from the Yoke, and a lot of us are playing a Legacy-style game for the first time. And we're sort of diving in, fully embracing the fact that we're figuring this out as we go. And that, honestly, has been part of the fun, is just really essentially kicking the tires on this game. I would add that some of the surprises for the game have been how interesting it is to move around to different roles. You play your house in one moment, you play your character in the next moment, and then in the moment after that, you're playing a quick character in someone else's house, or you're playing a tool or a instance of the Arbiter, this sort of power that looks over the land. It involves collaborative map making. It involves thinking about the relationships between your characters. It involves thinking about the generations between the characters. There are a lot of moving parts, and yet the game flows really nicely. I feel like we haven't gotten too stuck on any of the rules and haven't been sort of held up as we're trying to figure out some of the mechanics. For a player like me that really likes to zoom in and out and explore different aspects of my character and gets impatient with just playing the same character day in and day out, it really suits me really, really well. Alan is doing such a good job jamming this game because there's so many moving parts, there's lots of things to think about. He's got to worry about every house's motivation. He's got to worry about where every character is, and still try and weave together a really interesting story despite everything that we're throwing at him. Free from the Yoke, it's my game of the year.
Hi, I'm Anya, also known as at Darkade. 2022 was a big gaming year for me. Me and my group started recording games, and it led me down a rabbit hole of learning how to make a ton of tools to help teach different games. And it's the year I got into the OSR. My favorite games I got to run were Nahual, Fallout, Dungeon Crawl Classics, and Blades in the Dark. I also got the chance to run a short campaign of Troika, which I was really itching for. My favorite games where I got to play were Hearts of Wulin, Primal, and Old School Essentials. That last one finally allowed me to understand why the feeling of D&D appeals to so many people. It was great. But my game of the year is Brindlewood Bay. With 20 sessions, it's one of my longest running games. We're in the home stretch of the campaign, and it's been intense, scary, but a ton of fun. So much fun that the players insisted we record it, and it's been a great learning experience. Thank you all. Have a great end of the year holidays.
Hi, this is Will H, and my pick of the year for 2022 is the Delta Green Divergence Quarterly series that I played earlier in the year. That was run by Lowell Francis, much like my pick for last year, the Knights Black Agents game. And much like that game last year, it was a real, just absolute masterclass in how to do a big, interesting, spooky, horrific, investigative game, you know? I really love pulling on strings and putting details together, and this game just delivered it in every way, as well as delivering everything that I would want from a Delta Green game. Now, it probably sounds a little bit hyperbolic, but, you know, the truth is that Lowell just really pulled it off. We used this hack of Gumshoe, sort of an express hack that he made called Gumshoe Express, the same system that we sort of used for Knights Black Agents. And it works, you know, it's much more streamlined than Gumshoe. Ultimately, though, it's not the system that really made this game. It was the players. It was the work that Lowell put in. It was how it really just delivered everything that I would ever want from a long-term Delta Green campaign. Paranoia, conspiracy, you know, like horrors, both mundane and mythos. Just managed to do a really tremendously balanced mix of investigation, action, and everybody involved managed to insert all of their characters. Well, managed to bring their characters to every interaction, to every action that they took. You know, we would break out of the narrative and have like discussions of the theories and the plans, but we'd often just slip back and forth in and out of character as we, you know, talked about why we believed this meant that and what we had to do about this. And, you know, by the end of the game, I really felt like we all had these really formed relationships with each other, and, you know, certain breakpoints and pressure points and grudges and, bonds. And Lowell did a brilliant job as well of mixing in the downtime, like our lives outside of the Delta Green operations. And overall, I'd say that's really what makes me choose this series. It's how well it delivered on the narrative, the themes. You know, every mystery, every scenario that we played was this brilliant mix of intrigue and puzzles and, you know, little bits of information coupled with horrendous action and, you know, dramatic consequences. But it all tied into this theme of, you know, the seedy underbelly of America, of contemporary politics, of libertarianism, of poverty, of the system being corrupted, of just, yeah, it was brilliant. I've probably said that word far too many times now, but every single one of them was deserved. The session where we fought a body-hopping sorcerer that was tied to a serial killer from decades ago that ended in a gunfight in the middle of a mall, requiring a hasty cover-up and blackmail and, you know, brought undue attention to our group. I mean, that session just lives on in my memory as one of the best sessions I've ever had of any game ever. So, yeah, all I can say is thank you, Lowell, thank you, Alan, thank you, Paul, and thank you, Horst, for such a wonderful time in the conspiracy. I can't wait for more Mythos.
Hello, I'm Madeline Colley, Mads for short, she, they, and I want to laud Heaven is Here If You Want It by Ray Najati to be nominated for Game of the Year 2022 for the Gauntlet. This is the year where I was introduced to belonging outside belonging games, starting with Venture by Riley Berthal, then Feathers by Remy Perman, and then Heaven is Here and Our Haunt, also by Ray. Heaven is Here has the most impact for me, even though I didn't listen to the inspirational material, which is the Florence and the Machine album Dancing Fever. This game starts off simply with 4 playbooks: the King, the Dancer, the Oracle, and the Devil. And it gives the impression of otherworldly beings navigating these moments in their lives on this rock called Earth, flowing through gender, identity, and art. In both playthroughs of this game, I could not escape the emotional narrative of all the different flavors, yet also feel safely distanced from it, like a tasting menu. Phrases like, "A cloak of many pockets filled with letters I'll never send and scraps of poetry I'll never complete," or "Make a demand that cannot be denied." And the looks and descriptors make it very easy to navigate and collaborate with the other players to tell some sort of story. Not necessarily plot, but a story. Response for response, earning tokens to spend on even bigger moves later on at the end of scenes, also known as moments in the game. If you like surreality, a slice of strange life, and are okay with exploring different aspects of yourself in roleplay, I highly recommend picking this up and playing. Safety tools and consent should always be priority, but at a good table with considerate players, this will only serve to help the other characters engage with what matters most. To paraphrase from the game, everyone collaborates to tell a story together. It's best if you let go and see where the game and story takes you.
Hi, this is Donna to talk about my favorite RPG of the year. I expect to have played about 70 different RPGs by the end of this year, and picking just one favorite is so difficult. So here are some honorable mentions to ease myself into it. With last year's top spot going to Alice is Missing, I have to mention my combining of that game with Monster Arts 2 to create an amazing experience back in January. We're returning with a town called Malice as a prequel soon, and I expect great things. Also, I'm going to shout out Wander Home by Jade Dragon in a campaign, Triptych by Thomas Manuel as a one-shot, and Heaven or Hell by Kiana Shaw as a duet. But top spot this year goes to Molotov College by W.H. Arthur, which I ran a 2-shot of at the most recent Open Gaming Weekend. As a belonging outside belonging game, it consistently hit the mark with great anchors created by the world building, evocative questions and character generation, and strings, both heart and conspiracy board, tugged by the moves in play. Even though it wore its Umbrella Academy inspiration on its sleeve, we found some entirely surprising and somehow inevitable twists in our tale, and the table's decision to deploy the unused playbooks as the main NPCs really paid dividends in tying together all the alumni in a web of "it's complicated." Highly recommended, and I'd love to get it back to the table for an extended run maybe next year. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Paul, and it is my first year with the Gauntlet community. The games I've mainly played this year are Trophy Gold, The Between, and its offshoot, Ghost of El Paso. But those games have already gotten so much love from the community, and I wanted to shout out another game, Nishtana. This is my game of the year because it gave me my most unique and memorable TTRPG experience in 2022. This is a GM-less game where you tell your own version of the Exodus story. On the more mechanical side of things, it's great. It has a tight structure in the form of rituals that give you enough room to be creative while avoiding the lack of direction that can slow down groups when playing GM-less games. I really appreciate that it provides a long and short version of the game depending on your time constraints. Its wait mechanic gives players clear permission to add to the story when inspiration strikes them, and the whole game is well written overall. What really sold me was the amount of meaning packed into the game and the clear love that the designers put into it. It really does a great job welcoming you to share in this story that is a major part of Jewish culture no matter your background. Yes, you do get to tell a great story with your friends and loved ones with this game, But by the end of the game, you will become closer to them as people, because through some of the rituals, the game asks you to share parts of yourself with your group. These moments of genuine vulnerability that the game makes really fosters that feeling of being a family around a table, enjoying time with one another. It is a great game, and everyone should play it.
Sherri,
Hi.
want to hear what you have chosen.
Yeah, so I have listened to all of these other fine descriptions with good reasons for the games that they loved, and I have to admit, listeners, that for me, looking back at the year, it's kind of like when you've had a fever as a child and you're looking at the holiday lights and everything's sort of a blur, but some of the lights are shinier than others. This is more my criteria for my games of the year, if that comes out. I keep saying I didn't play much this year, but in fact, there were only 2 weeks where I didn't play any games, and most weeks it was for 3 to 4. And yet, because I was so immersed in these other projects, it did not give them the mental space in the time that I was playing them, though I enjoyed each session. When I was playing a session, I was there. But then I would get out and be on to other things. So going through all of these, I am picking out the prettiest baubles from my year. This is what it is. It is purely a choice of baubles. I can't always give you good reasons, but I'm going to try. I think the first two I'm going to hit on is, I don't usually like one-shots. I find them unsatisfying, even if I enjoy the play. If it was a really good one-shot, all that means is I want more. But every once in a while, you hit some that are run with so much skill that you just go, yep, that was a perfect experience. I'm good with it. And Lowell had me sit in one of the Gauntlet facilitator camps to play with a couple of the GMs that were going through that process. And I got to play 2 perfect one-shots 1 week after the other. And I have to call them out. The first one was Amanda's Birdtacular Brindlewood Bay mystery that was called Murder Most Foul, and it was a mystery she'd written. It was very funny and punny, and it had just the right mix of silliness and menace to it. Ran it impeccably, knew it backwards and forwards, had a great sense of humor. All of the characters were so bright and well played, and of course the players were lovely. So we just had such a great time with a story that was both at that same time kind of funny and a little silly, but also it has that Brindlewood Bay of, really kind of creepy things are happening. So it was great. I enjoyed Amanda as a GM. I enjoyed the mystery. Just a really great experience. I was like, can't get any better than that. But then the next week I played with Dana and they ran a Trophy Gold adventure that had us as treasure hunters going into this haunted, mysterious, horrible, mythic almost hunter's chateau and ruining our lives. And it was run beautifully. It kind of did that thing that the trophy games do where it takes a sort of OSR or very simple setup and makes it very, like, you kind of know what you're moving through, but everything ends up being a surprise because a lot of it is generated by the other players, and it's just you've got these goalposts, so you know that at some point there'll be an end, and it's not looking for, secret doors and stuff the whole time. But it was really fun. Dana ran it so clean and had so many interesting bits. It was just, again, another perfect little one-shot, and I had 2 of them in that many weeks, and it was surprising to me, and I have to call them out. I just had to. The other sort of like smaller plays that I did that I super enjoyed to a surprising extent were Star Wars Saturdays games. I always enjoy Star Wars Saturdays because it's like showing up to a place where everyone else is the expert and you're just the newbie that gets to be dragged along to see the things that they love. Because I watched the first trilogy, but I don't know the deep lore, and I certainly don't know all the different races and what their cuss words are and stuff like that. So, but still, I always have a good time. But 2 of the different series that I were in were particularly fun. The first one was an adaptation of The Sprawl that was singularly silly and fraught at the same time. The lineup was a ruthless Jawa mechanic There was a very kind-hearted gunner, a driver that had so much baggage wrapped up in their vehicle, and then I had like an infiltrator who just wanted to make enough money so that, they could bring money back to their girlfriend so they could have a life. And the premise of the thing was that we were trying to bust a on the cusp of stardom pop starlet out of her coerced record deal. It went terribly wrong, everyone was bloody and stuff, and yet in the end we eked out a victory. But it was just a fun game because the players were there for it, and the sprawl is so dangerous. I mean, you're really just one roll away from terrible, terrible bodily harm, and all the time, and you could go out at any minute. We managed to make it all the way through with all the players, so that was a win. But it was just one of those games where everyone really brought their A game, and you were completely fond of that crew. The other one was a Jedi-ified version of a game that's in beta, Starscape. And it's sort of based on these trust mechanics. And when I say trust mechanics, the currency is trust. It's not that you're going to try to catch someone before they fall kind of thing. But so essentially it was interesting because of those mechanics, and it was in play test at the time. We spent a lot of time talking about the dynamics of trust and sort of, how it worked and stuff, because of course we are a community that does do a lot of play testing, so we do tend to get meta about the things, but we ended up having so many good scenes in that game that I'm going, when this game is like all polished and stuff, I think it's going to be really brilliant. But that was a game where it was just one really good scene after another. So Starscape is a PBTA to kind of keep an eye on, okay? Really good. But very different sense of how you're moving around through scenes and stuff. Super enjoyed that. I played in a slew of longer series, so I only have good things to say about Dune D20, about Godbound, Mage PBTA, which is a sort of unofficial beta hack that you can find on the internet if you look. There's Hearts of Wooland, of course, was wonderful, and Lowell's run of the Veil iterations was dynamite, and Rhapsody of Blood, which was mentioned, amazing, super good. But there are two games for me that are duking it out for Games of the Year. One of them's in beta, it's available on itch.io, and the other one successfully kickstarted this year, and it's sure to be available in 2023. You'll find it in lovely PDF and physical form sometime during that year, I'm sure. But the beta game is available on itch.io, and it's The Twilight Throne and the Houses of Rune. So mentioned prior, we finished playing this in early 2022, and I'm still thinking about that game. I'm thinking about the game as like what it was doing and the way that it handled Blade's mechanics. It repurposed all the pieces, put them into a thing where the play, every aspect of it felt meaningful and full of potential, and just there was so much stuff you could do, so much stuff you wanted to do, that the whole angst of the game was that, oh, this is great, but I need more so that this thing can happen. It was a game that made me so greedy, the greediest person that ever was. And so I just want to say it's out there in beta. There's going to be more on it, and you should keep an eye out for this.
Ooh.
And then the game that was kickstarted is available is Apocalypse Keys. I had played that early, I'd played that mid in development, but when I played the finished version, the polished version, the Evil Hat version, it was so beautiful and pristine. All of the work that Ray and Evil Hat and the dev editors had done to take every word of this game and make it just so. I don't think there's any other way to put it. Every pick list was just chock full of potential. Every move was sort of mind-blowingly big and meaningful and full of story that I was like, I can't say I didn't recognize it. I certainly did. But my heart just burst with how amazing it moved on to this sort of perfect text. And that is so fun to see. And I have to say, I love playing RPG games, but most of the time you're working with something kind of rough. Even these finished published ones, you go, they just got the basics down and that's all I need. But this kind of is like just as much a joy to read and to think about what this would mean. The text is beautiful. And I just have to say that when we played it, the game is powerful. Everything in it is big and it's monstrous and it's teetering between saving the world and plunging into a horrific oblivion. It feels like those comic books for the big, messy, conflicted, monstrous characters. It feels like the best parts of the movies. It feels like everything you do is consequential. And yet everything you do is also in a loop. That's just, this is the story of my life. This is how I ruin everything. And it's such a good game. So even though it's between Twilight Throne and Apocalypse Keys, this year I'm going to go with Apocalypse Keys as my best of the year because people can get a hold of it. It's perfection right now. I think they're just waiting on some stretch goals. Mm-hmm. And I know those are going to be as play tested and as polished by the time they make it to the book as the rest of the text is. Just a brilliant piece of work. That's my year.
Let me say this, and I kind of hesitate to say this because Ray is here, but having run Apocalypse Keys with Ray present and having Ray be doing the kind of design and refining of just an admiration of how smart a designer he is. Just, there's some moments where I see things and I'm like, okay, well, this is obviously the shift that you would make with this to fix this. And then they go, here's the shift. And I'm like, oh, that's so much smarter than the choice that I was going for. And so much more aware of the whole of the system. So yeah, it's a dynamite design game and really illustrative of how good a designer Ray is. So.
Oh my gosh, thank you. We have to move on because I'm going to start crying. So,
okay.
But thank you very much, both of you.
Listeners, we're going to hear from some more community members.
Hello, my name's Alan. My experience of the Gauntlet is that every game is a great game. I've never had a dud, really. Neither as a player or as a GM, for that matter. But the question of which is my game of the year is an important one, because it forces me to think back across the games I've played and to come to a judgment, a difficult judgment. Let me start with the runner-up. The runner-up is the series of Free from the Yoke that I'm currently running. We will be 5 or 6 sessions in by the time you hear this, I think. Currently 4 down. And I have been nervous about Free from the Yoke, as I am of all the Legacy games. I backed it as a Kickstarter, was very excited about it, love to read it, but I've never had the balls to run it. The nerve it takes to take on that quite, it's quite a monster. But then Lowell Francis, who is our community manager, ran a seminar online that encouraged me to think maybe I could do it. So my thanks to Lowell for that, and my thanks to Dan Brown, who stimulated me to actually put it on the calendar. It's a great game. The players are engaged with it. They are bringing life to it. They brought life to the history of the Land of the Wise, and they are just, throwing everything at it. And it's exciting. It's the switch from what's happening at the level of the houses and what's happening at the level of players is fantastic. I'm having a great time. So that is a very close runner-up, it must be said. And I hope this has got me to the point where I'm going to run a lot more Legacy or Legacy-based games in the future. But my winner, my game of the year for 2022, has got to be Delta Green. Delta Green, run as a quarterly by aforesaid Lowell Francis. This was one of the peak gaming experiences that I've had, not just this year, but full stop. What Lowell managed to do was to bind into the framework of Delta Green many of the ills that I think those of us abroad associate with the States. The stuff about class differences, gosh, we can talk, but the economic divide, the way in which those that have seem, and this is perhaps around the world, those that have want to hang on to it and want to keep those that don't have in a position where they can never have. It was a fantastic series. It took us to the dark heart of America, and it was all the more impressive, really, because we were mostly Brits. And so it was quite remarkable how he created in those sessions a sense of that dark heart that we explored, confronted, and some of those characters didn't come out the other side. So my game of the year is Delta Green, run by Lowell Francis, and my thanks to the other players who, together made it a fantastic experience. That's my game of the year.
Hi, my name is Mike Ferdinando, and I've been a member of the Gauntlet for about 4 years. I'm having a very hard time deciding upon my game of the year for 2022. I play so many games that I keep track of them on a spreadsheet. And that tells me that I've played 109 RPG sessions so far this year, with at least one session of 28 different RPGs. I've had a whole lot of fun with all of them, so this is a tough choice. My 2022 Game of the Year is a live-action online game called Long-Time Listener, Last-Time Caller, written by Jeff Dieterell. This is a game about a live call-in radio show that happens to be on the air at the end of the world. One player takes the role of the host of the show. The other players are callers who call into the show while things around them deteriorate. Before you start the game, you decide as a group the kind of radio show you want to use and also the nature of the sudden apocalypse. When play starts, everyone then turns off their cameras and are only connected by voice to simulate radio. The host has a set of 8 principles for the show. Ask about the topic, stay on topic, no dead air, don't let the callers ramble, keep it light, keep the show moving, no profanity, and maintain the ideological or philosophical position of the show. The first 2 calls are normal. Nothing weird happens. Starting with a third call, the callers should start to introduce strange and unsettling things related to the upcoming apocalypse. The calls should then get increasingly weird and desperate. As the game progresses, the host and callers will violate the 8 principles, and the host keeps track of which ones have been broken. When the last principle is broken, that signals the end game. Take one last call, and the game ends. I ran this game as a one-shot for GCOG in September. The premise of our show was a nationwide public radio cooking show called Out of the Frying Pan with Chef Jeff. I played Jeff. And what started out light and breezy turned scary and dark as the sun was eclipsed by something much larger than the moon. The sky turned a sickly violet, and weird green lightning flashed across the nightmarish sky. The calls went from advice on how to pan-sear halibut steaks to begging for missing loved ones to call home. On the last call, Jeff's own son called into the radio show, pleading for his father to get off the air and come home. I've been playing RPGs for over 40 years, and this was by far and away the most intense and harrowing game session I've ever been in. It was beautiful and funny and tragic and cathartic. I was also blessed with some of the best players I've ever gamed with. The game itself only took about 90 minutes, but I scheduled a good 45 minutes for debrief. And that was a good idea because the bleed was real. This game is going to stick with me for a very long time, and I really want to play it again. My game of the year for 2022, long-time listener, last-time caller.
Hi everyone, it's David S. Last year, I felt a little embarrassed naming Hearts of Wulin my game of the year, on account of it already having been released for a few years. Well, I seem to be moving in the wrong direction, as my game of the year 2022 is none other than Jason Morningstar's Night Witches. Now, if my shameless love for games like Hearts of Wulin didn't already give it away, I am a total sucker for high drama, and this game delivers in spades. I was lucky enough to play a full run of Night Witches this year, from January through July, and every single session was filled with nail-biting tension, as we played the full saga of the 588th Night Bomber Regiment all the way through to the end of World War II. Narratively, forcing all the PCs and NPCs into the same Soviet air base the entire time creates dog-eat-dog competition, where backstabbing, rumors, and subterfuge are necessary to survive during the game's day phase. And then, in a fit of genius, the game turns all of the infighting the players spent all day cultivating on its head by forcing the very same PCs and NPCs that were fighting each other during the day phase to cooperate on lethal bombing runs during the night phase. This back and forth game design is seriously brilliant, and as far as I know, it's the first PBTA game to set up different day and night phases, which are now common in games like Brindlewood Bay and the Between. But my favorite thing about Night Witches is how it manages to create such a consistently tense story across long-term play with only about 11 moves. It's a real masterclass in PBTA design, and I absolutely lucked out by getting to spend half a year playing the whole thing. Cheers, and Happy New Year, everybody.
Hello. Welcome to 2023. My name is Ry Berg, and I'm going to tell you about my favorite game for 2022. I didn't game too much in 2022, but I did run almost 15 sessions of Songs for the Dusk. I did some Microscope, some Brindlewood Bay, some Raccoon Sky Pirates, and some Microscope. But what I would like to say is my favorite game of 2022 that I played was Stone Top. Stone Top is an Iron Age fantasy game, and it does some really unique takes on kind of the dungeon world experience. It has completely revised character playbooks that each did very unique things, and I felt that the specific things that they did were easy to bring into play as a GM and helped to really create a deep and engaged world very quickly. The other thing I really liked about Stone Top were the setting materials, the monsters and the fairy creatures, and the setting around Stone Top has a lot of detail that you can kind of pick up and set down as needed. And it made it very easy as a GM to kind of set up some threats and have some monsters statted out, so I didn't have to do too much background work for the little short 4 sessions that I ran. And the last thing that I loved about Stone Top was the focus on the village. Having that focus on the village really gave our characters something to care about from the very beginning and helped me as a GM to create situations that they had to do something about or their loved ones would suffer some consequences. So it made it really easy to kind of turn those thumb screws a little bit when needed, and it gave us a great setting to fall back on to kind of highlight some of the village dynamics and some of the not downtime because there's no official downtime, but some of those more less action-oriented sequences where we had some great scenes just in and among the village with some of the NPCs that were created during the setup process. I played this with Lowell and Mario and Matt and Horst, and I also just have to take my hat off to them because they leaned in so hard to their characters and then leaned on each other's characters too and pushed each other and created difficulties for each other and made my life very easy as a GM. So it was a great 4-session run, and I really enjoyed it. The only thing I'm not totally sure about in Stone Top is the core book. Like I said, the extra materials and the setting materials are great. They do need a little bit more organization, but they're not finished yet, so that's a critique to hold off on. But the core book has so much DM advice in there, and I'm not necessarily the most veteran PBTA GM, but I do have quite a few number of games under my belt, and every time I read a new page, there was something new that I felt like I needed to incorporate into my practice, and I felt a little bit overwhelmed. Once we got it into play, I kind of fell back into my old habits and everything went fine, but that is a dense book and definitely a PhD masterclass in PBTA GMing if there is one. So again, Stone Top is a great game, especially if you like a more gritty fantasy setting focused on kind of the mundane to some extent with opportunities for the fantastic. So I hope everyone has a great 2023, and I look forward to seeing you on the Gauntlet.
All right. So it's me, Lowell, giving my picks, wrapping this up. So I played 29 different games this year. That's
Amazing.
actually one more than last year.
Mm-hmm.
And some of those I played multiples of, particularly Hearts of Wulin, several of those, and Masks, and some other things. One of the things I recognize is that I'm much more a GM than I am a player. Like the GM stuff really sticks with me. But I had some really good experiences as a player. I tried to play more this year. For example, I played Alice is Missing, which I was skeptical about, but was a really dynamite experience. I played a game of Bastion Land, just a one-shot with Horsed Running, which is an OSR hex crawl. And it's the first time I got how OSR hex crawl emergent narrative can work, and it was really opened things up for me. Stone Top, which I talked about recently on the podcast, was also really surprising. These are all shorter things that opened my eyes to some things. But the other two play games that I really enjoyed, that the Worldwide Wrestling game that Shane mentioned was great. Like, I've run a lot of Worldwide Wrestling, and I think I'm pretty good at it, and Tyler is better than I am. And it was really solid, and I got to bring back an NPC from our Gauntlet League Wrestling and finish out their story.
And also sing his theme song every week, which I very much enjoyed.
It's time for the percolator. It's time for the percolator. Yes, I did do that. And there was some great play there where players surprised me with their choices that changed up how I saw my character. And then there was the Fate of the Fairy Queen, which, again, I think I'm pretty good at running Fate. I enjoy Fate. I dug it, but Shane was dynamite at running Fate. Like, showed me some things about how to run that game that makes me want to go back. And I kept some of those things in mind when I ran, like Tachyon Squadron later in the year. So just really good. Really, really good. But I am primarily a GM. It's what I love. So the box of games that have really been my pick, I had just dynamite experiences with some Hearts of Wulin this year, which again I wrote, so I'm biased, but I think some of them really clicked. The Dune 2D20 game we've been running is really interesting because it gives me room to do that kind of community planning and building that I love. The Mage PBTA game, this is a hack from years ago, and it's an absolute mess, but the game has worked despite that. I also ran Masks. Masks is still a dynamite game. Like, it's really good. If you have some competency in it and you really lean into it and you've got good players, boy, Masks hums every time. And Apocalypse Keys. What can I say about that? That's been a pleasure to run, and I'm running 2 different quarterlies of it in 2023. Like, that's a commitment there. But my games of the year come down to 2 quarterlies that I ran here, 3-month sessions in 2023. The second place, and a hard pick, but it goes to Godbound, which is by Kevin Crawford, and we had run an arc of it the previous year. We came back to that arc this year. It was really fun. Great characters. Like, I love Godbound because it's OSR-y, but it's big. And you can just go big. And we've built a world that has interesting ideas and characters, and we're going to come back to it for a third arc at some point. I think if you're looking for an OSR adjacent game that has some widescreen action, I don't think you can do better than Godbound. I like a lot of Kevin Crawford's other work, but I think Godbound is a masterpiece. But my winner is the Delta Green series that I ran right at the start of the year. I came in at the end of 2021 with a very strong vision of what I wanted to do. Like, I had an idea and a theme and a feeling. And my Delta Green game was run in a modern setting, but using Pelgrane's Fall of Delta Green gumshoe rules. And the idea for me was this was a Delta Green game because it's about bureaucratic agency fighting the Cthulhu mythos, was that this was going to take place during the Trump administration. And that feeling, that uncertainty of the ground, that these people in these government agencies, that they have these lives there, that quicksand of that was going to be as much a kind of a vibe going on in the background as anything. And, one of our characters, an FBI agent who gets pulled in and, during one of the downtimes between the missions where they're told, we need you to go and pull up a threat assessment on Black Lives Matters. And another character who was South Asian and got pushed on because of that, some real questions about their loyalties and stuff. And it was really, really interesting. That was the vibe I wanted, and that was the vibe I got. And the players, I told them up front kind of what we were going for, and they dug it. And at the same time, the mysteries that I came up with were interesting, were striking. We got that varied feel. Each mystery was very different in terms of what they were doing, who they were interacting with, what they were exploring. The third mystery really kind of cut out their support system, and they were kind of freaking out about that. And they were in a situation where they were like, I think we just need to run away. But they kind of decided to stay. It was good. It was a game where I had to do a lot of planning in the sense of there would be more than I usually do, 4 or 5 hours of kind of planning out the mystery, which is heavy prep for this. But then once I kind of got up to speed, then when we actually got to playing the sessions, I can go back to my keeping myself to 1 hour before each game. And it was good. I can be really hard on myself, and I know I'm a pretty good GM. And
wait, I have to say you're like an amazing GM. I just have to interrupt for a moment. But anyway, okay.
But I felt like that game really did what I wanted it to do. Like I felt that it hit the notes I wanted to. The players hit the notes. The ending was satisfying. I was pleased with all the mysteries. Like, it was the complete package. I rarely have that feeling where I'm like, well, I've done that. I never need to run that again, because that is the absolute boom hits. I think there's a campaign of Vampire the Masquerade that I ran a number of years ago that when I got done, I was like, I never have to run that again. There, I've done that. That was perfect. But the Delta Green game was great and surprised me for how well it went off. Maybe makes me nervous for future quarterlies, but it was amazing. I'd say that the Gumshoe rules, I like them. I don't love them, but I like them, and I think they did help. So that's my pick, Delta Green. Here are some more community member picks.
Here we are once again. Our annual +1 Forward invades the Gauntlet podcast for the end of the year, Rach.
I'm so excited. We get to go back to our corner of the Gauntlet podcast that's got snacks and beanbag chairs. Nobody seems to clean it out in between years. Maybe they're just conveniently overlooking it.
Oh, thank goodness they haven't thrown out the Nintendo Entertainment Console that we snuck in with the old CRT.
Got to go with the vintage stuff, man. It's designed to play out a CRT.
So speaking of games, we are here to talk about the Game of the Year. And reminder, it's the favorite game, so it doesn't have to be new. You've got a couple of finalists, and I have 4. So let me go through my short list, abbreviated, hopefully. The game I got the most sessions play out of is Stonetop. Stonetop is a Powered by the Apocalypse game, still in development hell with Jeremy Strandberg. It was a Kickstarter that did quite well. I think of it as Dungeon World 2.0, maybe 3.0.
I've definitely heard that idea echoed by other people describing it as the next spin around of Dungeon World.
And it does that in spades. I really, really enjoy Stonetop's rule set. Now, while the low fantasy setting of that Stonetop is part of, like, there is a built-in, you're at this tiny, tiny, tiny village. My wife didn't jive with that. This is the game that my wife and I play once, twice a week. And so we got 30 full sessions. When I say a session, that's usually both sessions that week. So 30 sessions of Stonetop was enough to get an idea that it's a great replacement for Dungeon World. Dungeon World, fine game, showing its age in a PBTA development style. Stonetop improves on the verbiage, the moves, adds in a lot of interesting steading improvements, and enhances some of the companion moves. I really quite like Stonetop. A finalist from last year makes another appearance here. The Stars in the Dark, which is Undisha from the Gauntlet, created his amazing Blades in the Dark reskin to Star Wars. 29 sessions, and we brought the campaign to a close this year, just a couple months ago, in fact. What a great game. We got this year an opportunity to rise in tiers and explore deeper play with the factions, which we burned everything down in 1313 and ended up running to level 1314. That's a little Coruscant talk between me and you, Rach. So
I know what you're talking about. Don't worry.
we're nerding about nerd stuff. Sorry. But yeah, we basically had to escape from 1313 and end up in 1314. And Anish came up with a whole new slew of factions for it. The amount of inspiration he poured into that game was stunning, and that made it definitely a finalist for me. Now, as a +1 forward person, you're going to be... I'm a little embarrassed to say that my next two shortlist finalists are not PBTA.
What?
I know, but... you play with groups, and sometimes groups don't always want to play PBTA. Vampire 5th Edition. Now, I cut my teeth as a GM with 2nd edition D&D, but I learned to evolve my craft as a game master with Vampire the Masquerade. I played a lot of 1st and 2nd edition, as well as Requiem. But once I got bitten by the indie bug and learned story games and PBTA was as much fun with less work, I kind of walked away, and the game started to feel clunky to me, and it never did quite fulfill mechanically that promise of personal horror. But then Jesse Ross, creator of Trophy Dark, Trophy Gold, Girl Underground, bunch of other games, said, hey, I'd like to run Vampire 5th Edition for you guys to the home group. And wow, 5th Edition is the best version of Vampire the Masquerade, bar none. Like, it is great. Hunger Dice alone revolutionized the game and add teeth. The times that our Vampire PCs frenzied were just game changers, literal game changers. It was the personal horror, the fright of being this inhuman monster. So good. Oh.
It sounds so cool.
It is the coolest, Rach. We got a Vampire Masquerade 5th Edition around or something. It's so good. And then last but not least is Fallout 2D20. I have not really played a lot of Modifius's 2D20 stuff, but Lowell offered to run a series for the Gauntlet, and I got in on that. At the same time, I've been aching to run something for my wife and son, and getting my son into an RPG has been a challenge. Like, we've had a whole pandemic and did not play any RPGs, tabletop RPGs together. But then I said, hey, I know you like that Fallout video game. You want to give this tabletop game a shot? It is pretty darn solid. I know Fallout 4 from when it first came out. I know a bit of the lore of Fallout 3. My son has played Fallout New Vegas, which he considers one of his top 5 video games ever. Fallout 3, Fallout 4, to excess, even Fallout Shelter, I think. He loves Fallout, and this game really brings that lore to life. It apes the mechanics of the video game in smart ways. There are tons of random tables, and Rach, it's weird because here I am, this indie head, and I'm running Fallout 2D20, and I'm doing random encounter tables and rolling for loot, and I have to roll dice from time to time. It is so traditional, really traditional.
I think there's some fun parts to the 2D20 system. I remember playing a 2D20 game at a convention before the pandemic, and I had an absolute blast showing up with a bunch of story gamers, and we had a very trad GM, And it just vibes so well together. Even if you're coming as a story gamer, you have a great time.
Yeah, it's a good, solid game. I've had a really great time with it. A lot of my prep for the game is watching YouTube stories on lore about certain Fallout 4 places and then going, how do I reconstitute that as a thing? Okay, I'll just use that. That sounds good. It's fun. I really like Fallout 4. That's my short list. What about you, Rach? What are your top 2?
They're interesting choices, complicated choices. So the first one is probably one of the longest campaigns I've run since at least the start of the pandemic, which is Fellowship. I started running Fellowship after Paul Beakley was on the show and sold me on the idea of Fellowship. And let's just say Fellowship ends up in this weird category of I enjoyed running this game, and I don't regret the time we spent with this game, but that's increasingly in spite of the game itself.
Ooh.
Which, if we go back several years for listeners who have been around for a while, might remind people of your position on The Sword, the Crown, and the Unspeakable Power.
Mm-hmm.
Is the fun I'm having because of the game or in spite of the game? It's unclear. So for context, this was a game I put together with my fanfic friends where I decided to run Fellowship to play a canonical setting and see what happens, so to see if it exploded. And we're all fans of Type Moon's Fate franchise, and we're using the Empire framework from the In Rebellion book because it admittedly reminded us of the Sonic the Hedgehog cartoon from our childhoods. And I'm not making this up. This was like literally the discussion we had during Character Gen is we're using this framework because it reminds us of this cartoon from 25 years ago. I had a blast. There is so much fan art I've had made for this campaign by my players. There's so many memes. They will generate memes and fan art during the session.
Wow.
Which just blows my mind, Rich. I'll be like, oh, wait, this meme. Wait, this happened while we were playing. What the heck is going on? I really think the sweet spot for this campaign. So at this point, we're about 20 sessions in.
Wow.
The game is starting to collapse under its own weight, as PBTA usually does at this point. I have players who have figured out, oh, I can take these moves and I don't have to roll dice anymore. And they really stink at rolling dice, so they're very happy with this. But I think as of this recording, there's maybe a session or two left before it's done. And our sweet spot was admittedly closer to session 5. At that point, we had a compelling rhythm to the game in terms of the players felt confident with the NPCs and how they wanted to split the party and deploy the party, what PCs were going with, what NPCs do what things, and what the outcomes were and how to manage those outcomes when the mission, of course, went lopsided. Also, making space for what types of NPCs we want to have, which is very important for Fellowship because you have companions, which taught me a lot as a GM about what makes an NPC likable and listening to your players in terms of, oh, we want this character around. Because there was a canonical character who I put in because my players kept hinting at it would be nice if this particular character showed up until one of them said pretty black and white, Rach, put this character in play. We want to interact with this character. So I learned a lot there in terms of like almost like feeding into the fan service of what your players want to see more of. However, after we got through that sweet spot is when the cracks in the system started to show, especially in terms of how the moves address the fiction, because it's not as robust as I would want, even with the Imperial modifications. We do find ourselves grappling for certain moves at this point, so I will be satisfied and happy once the campaign is done and put to bed in a week or two, I feel. My second choice is Urban Shadows, and I'm rolling my eyes right now because, Rach, you're going back to your old flame, and listen, listeners, I have needs, and sometimes those needs involve going back to your nostalgic urban fantasy game and playing a trash fire. You're laughing because you know my trash fire.
I do.
And I want to give context. I think sometimes when we want to play more complicated characters, it's easy to say, I want to play this character that's a little bit morally gray, deal with it. But I had design goals for my PC, and I wanted to revisit a character who was an NPC in some duet games my partner Rob and I had run in 2016 and 2018, who he was a trash fire back then, but I just really liked the idea of this character who is, in those games, he was an NPC scholar character. So someone who trades, barters in artifacts, but he had, in his history, had relationships with the mortal banking industry and for reasons ended up in the supernatural banking industry, as it were. But because I have at our table, because Rich is playing with us and there's some other people who have may have mentioned on this podcast before, some other people are new to tabletop role-playing games or are new to this particular group and haven't played with each other. I want to play a character who was a little bit morally gray, but also socially accessible. I didn't want to be the lone wolf who ruined everyone's day. I felt the best way to do that was in Urban Shadows. There are sometimes debt prompts in character gen that are a little bit more negatively angled or loaded, make you look like a shitbag. And my position was, if one of those prompts comes up and nobody will take them, I will raise my hand and say, perhaps my character did it. Let's talk about what that looks like in a way that doesn't really feel disempowering to you. In a way that, we'll still talk, but I did this terrible thing to you. Which, I mean, for a little bit of context, resulted in Rich's character breaking my arm in character gen.
Yeah.
It was great. I started first session in a sling. It was amazing.
I have really enjoyed the choices you have made and the dedication that you've shown to making these choices of this trash fire.
I love Valberg so much. My conclusions is just to show how out of control it's gotten for me as a character. Is my quote I wrote here is, fake dating is an amazing trope and should be used in more games. Because I think he's dating Rich's wife's character and has not realized he's in a relationship yet. And that's totally going to come up next session. Is like, oh no, I'm dating this woman. Oh shit.
You're dating the fairy princess. It's great.
It's great. The mortal scholar is dating the fairy princess. And I think she's realized it, but he hasn't realized yet. It's going to be a whole moment next session. And yeah, so I think it was like a successful attempt to make a morally murky character that still talks to the party, that still has responsibilities, who is still available. He's just a shitbag. I really like how it's made us engage with debts differently, because it being that asshole means, yeah, sure, I want to cash in that debt with you. And it puts me in a position of like, yeah, I've already taken stuff from you. I'll happily call you out on it. I've always wanted to see a lot more debt fluidity, and I think we're getting it at that table.
Yes.
And the other side of it is, the fake dating thing is the will they, won't they relationship. I've never really seen in a tabletop game before. It's a huge trope in fiction. And
absolutely.
And I wonder if it has something to do with how Urban Shadows frames intimacy as intimacy rather than sex, like Monster Hearts does.
I do think adding that nuance and flexibility allows people to play with intimacy in ways that committing to characters having sex, oddly, it's a tough road for a lot of players, I've found.
As an example for our listeners, how this relationship started was Carrie botched the roll in terms of, I don't remember what we were doing. It was a complication. And I think the complication is her character and my character were researching something. And Rob, who is GMing this game, was like, yeah, you realize that, spending time with this person means you get insight in terms of how they think. And you don't find that unpleasant. Is that a moment of intimacy? And that's started us on this road to disaster. It was great.
It was great. Great, and led by excellent GM chops. Quite the MC, your husband, so... good call.
Keeps trying to pull this very disparate party back together despite their attempts to run away in different directions.
Well, those are our favorite games of the year, Gauntlet listeners. It's been a pleasure spending the year playing with all of you.
So those are all of our picks for 2022. How about that, huh? Listeners, this is the last episode for 2022. Going into 2023, we're looking at some format changes for the show, including hopefully bringing in some new voices. We've got some people that have been here for a while, and we'd like to mix things up. Now, we may continue as the Gauntlet podcast, or we may be shifting the show as things change this year, possibly with a new beginning, possibly with a new feed. We don't know yet. 2023 is going to be I know it's going to be tumult, so we'll see where that is. But we would like to continue this on with essentially very much this sort of approach of talking about games and getting someone from the community in to talk about games and doing that. We will try to keep folks informed about that as well as we can in the middle of Twitter exploding and social media being hard to reconcile. So we will see. That is our show. I want to thank all of the co-hosts here who are willing to give up their various time zone crossing days to this. Thank you so much for playing with us. You can check out the show notes for links about the games that we discussed. A huge, massive thank you to Rob Aberzado.
Thank you, Rob.
Yeah, absolutely. For wrangling this massive episode edit, and also a thank you to all of the community members who contributed to this show. When I go back, it's the episode I listen to again and again at the end of the year because there's always interesting games that I've never heard of or hadn't thought about here. If you are interested in playing with our community, you can email us at gauntletcommunity@gmail.com for more information. We have some videos up on the Gauntlet YouTube channel and on my YouTube channel about playing with us, and we'll try to have links for those in the show notes. So thank you, everybody. Once again, as the sort of the end of 2022. Anything anybody wants to say?
We made it, everybody! 2023! Yes. Congratulations!
Huzzah!
Don't jinx it, we're not quite there yet.
I'm just that excited.
And that is our show.